What is up, guys? This is Weasel for Red Chip Poker. The topic of this short training video is fold equity. So what is fold equity? How can we use it to make better decisions at the table? That's what we're going to be discussing in this video. Firstly, what is fold equity? Let's keep this very simple. It refers to the frequency with which we generate folds. For example, if we make a bet on the flop and we estimate that our opponent is going to be folding about 40% of the time, we can say that we have 40% fold equity. We'll also hear the term used in non-specific ways when numbers aren't involved. For example, we might hear a player say, "I don't think I have any fold equity in this situation." So what do they mean? They think that they have 0% fold equity. They think their opponent is never folding in a certain spot. Or they might simply say, okay, I think I have some fold equity in this situation, which means I think my opponent is going to be folding with some frequency. I just don't necessarily know what that frequency is. Of course, the more specific we can be, the more useful the value is. So it's very good if we can say, I think we have 60% fold equity in this spot, for example. So why do we need to know what our fold equity is? Well, it's useful for bluff and semi-bluff scenarios. So it's useful for figuring out how much fold equity we need in order for a certain bluff or semi-bluff to be profitable. You can also use it in the reverse way in expected value calculations, where we say, okay, we have 40% fold equity in this spot. What is our expected value given that we have a certain amount of fold equity? We're not going to be looking at expected value calculations in this video, but we will look at situations where we need to calculate how much fold equity we need in order for our expected value to be positive. Let's see the most simple example of this. And the concept here is named break-even points. The idea is if our opponent folds exactly at a certain frequency, our expected value will be exactly 0. We refer to that as the break-even point on a bluff. If our opponent folds more than the break-even point, our expected value becomes positive. If he folds less than the break-even point, our expected value becomes negative. Let's look at a very simple example. We're on the flop, there's $100 in the middle, and we make a half pot bet of $50. Question is, can we establish the break-even point of this bet? Now, unwritten assumptions here is that we have 0 pot equity. We're going to talk about how pot equity affects break-even points very shortly. Right now, we're going to assume that we have the worst possible hand, and we can never win at showdown with that hand. So 0 equity. How do we know what the break-even point of this bluff is? We can use this simple formula. The break-even point equals percentage of the total pot invested. Now this should make sense on a very, very basic level. If we invest 50% of the pot, we need to win 50% of the time. If we only invest 30% of the pot, we only need to win 30% of the time. Very, very straightforward. So the question is now, what percentage of the pot are we investing? And the answer is not 50% here because we have to include our bet into the size of the total pot. So the maths is going to look something like this. We're investing $50 into a total pot of 150. So that's the 100 that's already in the middle plus our 50, which we're making as our bet. We can see what percentage of 150 50 is by doing 50 divided by 150. We'll get the answer 0.3333 reoccurring on a calculator. If we want to convert that into a percentage, we can times it by 100 to get 33%. So if you haven't done this maths before, just try it now on a calculator. When we say 33%, that's obviously 33.33 reoccurring. It's more accurately expressed as 1/3. So we're investing 1/3 of the pot. Hence, that means that our bluff will break even if it works exactly 1/3 of the time. If it works more than that, if it works 35% of the time, it's going to be marginally plus EV. If it works less than 33% of the time, we're actually going to make a loss on this bluff, and it's not a good idea to make this bluff because it will be minus EV. Now, in most cases, the break-even point on this bluff will not be 33% because we're assuming at the moment that we have 0 pot equity. Of course, in most situations in poker, we don't have 0 pot equity. Even if we have very few outs, there's usually still a chance we can improve to the best hand by the river. The way this will work is, as we start to increase the amount of pot equity we have in this situation, the break-even point on our bluff will get lower and lower. So the more equity we have, the less fold equity we need in order for our bluff/semi-bluff to be profitable.